The fork froze in the air halfway to my mouth. My eyes involuntarily darted to the screen of the phone next to the plate. The notification glowed neon bright against the festive tablecloth. The transaction is complete. $15,322,000 has been deposited into your account. I jerked involuntarily, trying to cover the screen with my palm, but it was too late. Margot had already noticed. Wait a minute. Her hand swept across the table before I could react. What is this? Margot grabbed my phone, and her eyes widened. My insides clenched into a tight knot. 6 years of careful secrecy had crumbled in an instant because of my stupid habit of putting the phone screen up. 15 million? Her voice soared to an unnaturally high pitch. 15 million? A piece of turkey stuck in my throat. There was instant silence around the table. Mom froze with the carving knife. Dad stopped chewing. Trevor, Margot's husband, stared across the table at me with his mouth open. Briar? Mom's voice sounded strange, as if through absorbent cotton. What's she talking about? Yeah. I couldn't get the words out. 6 years I'd spent preparing for this moment, 6 years imagining what I'd say if my secret came out. And now I couldn't get a coherent thought out. She's a millionaire! Margot was practically shrieking, waving my phone around. Our little Briar who digs through junk and barely makes ends meet. She's got $15 million in her account. Give me the phone! My voice sounded suddenly firm, even though I was shaking inside. There must be some mistake. Mom shook her head. It must be spam or scammers. No, Mom! Margot looked at me triumphantly. Look at her face. It's true, isn't it, Briar? All eyes turned to me. I could feel the color flooding my face. For years I had been to them, Briar the loser, Briar the oddball, poor little Briar with her strange fascination with antiques. And now they were looking at me as if they were seeing me for the first time. Yes! I could finally bring myself to speak. It's true. Oh my God! Mom exhaled, slumping back in her chair. How? Antiques? I tried to speak calmly. I appraise and resell rare items. But your store, my father began. It's only the visible part, I explained, trying desperately to gather my thoughts. I have customers all over the world, collectors. 15 million, Margot repeated, as if in a trance. All this time, while I'm paying off the loan for the house, the car, the children's education. You sat on millions and didn't say a word? This is it. Here it comes. I knew I'd hear those words sooner or later. I knew it, and I was afraid. Margot, it's my money, I said quietly. I earned it. Your money? Her voice rose even higher. Don't you think about your family, about us, about your nephews? Briar. Mom's voice trembled. Why didn't you tell us anything? I couldn't tell her the truth, because I knew how you would react. Instead, I just shrugged. It's my business. I don't have to report back. Business? Margot snorted. You've been dealing with old junk all your life, and we've put up with your weirdness. We thought you were barely surviving in that little store of yours. You didn't, I said before I could hold it in. You laughed, all of you. There was an awkward silence in the room. I saw my father lower his eyes, and my mother fidgeted with her napkin. It's not fair, Mom finally said. We've always supported you. Have we? I raised an eyebrow. Remember what you said when I decided not to go to college and open an antique store instead? You're ruining your life with useless junk. I was worried about your future. And do you remember last Christmas? I continued, feeling the resentment that had been building up for years bursting through me. When Margot got her promotion and I told her about the rare Ming Dynasty vase I had appraised for a client, you said, That's lovely, dear, but when are you going to get a real job? Briar, Father tried to lighten the mood. Let's all calm down. 15 million, Trevor repeated, clearly still in shock. Damn it, Briar, you're richer than some celebrities. And all this time you've been pretending to be a poor relative. Margot looked like she'd been betrayed. Remember last year when we offered you money to fix up your apartment? I remembered. I remembered their condescending smiles when they offered me $1,000 for a new couch. That very day, I closed a $2 million deal. I never asked you for money, I said firmly. Never. Because you were swimming in it, Margot exclaimed. God, that's so unfair. Unfair? I couldn't believe my ears. What exactly was unfair about me earning my own money? The fact that you kept it from your family. Mom straightened up in her chair. Families are supposed to share with each other, support each other. Like you supported me when I opened the store? I asked. Or when I moved into the apartment above the store? You all thought it was a failure. But that's all changed now. Margot leaned forward. Now you can help your family. You know we're going through some tough times. Mortgage, school for the kids, car on its last legs. Wait! I raised my hand to stop her. Let me get this straight. My whole life, you've treated me like a loser, laughing at my hobby, calling my store unpromising. And now that you know I've made money, all on my own, you think you're entitled to it? Nobody's talking about entitlement, Mom said, conciliatory. But you're part of this family. And if you have a chance to help, 15 million, Dad muttered, shaking his head. I never would have thought. Exactly, I pointed at him. None of you ever believed in me. None of you ever thought I'd amount to anything. And now you want, what? Some of my money. Don't be so dramatic, Margot cut her off. I'm not asking for half your fortune, but if you have 15 million and your sister's having trouble paying off the house, that's kind of weird, don't you think? My heart was pounding so hard, I thought everyone at the table should hear it. For years I'd envisioned this moment, but the reality was worse than any imagined scenario. Instead of surprise, instead of pride, I saw only greed and resentment in their eyes. You know what's weird? My voice trembled with restrained emotion. The fact that in all these years, not a single one of you has ever asked how things were really going at my store. You just assumed I was a loser. Briar? Dad began, but I shook my head. No, Dad, I've seen how you treat my job, like a childish quirk that took me too long to outgrow. And now you're looking at me differently just because you recognize the number on my account. Okay, enough drama. Margot rolled her eyes. The fact is, you were sitting on a pile of money while your family made ends meet, and you didn't say anything, didn't do anything to help. You never asked for help, I pointed out. We don't have to ask, Margot exclaimed. You should have been the one to help, if you had the means. I could feel the room starting to spin around me. Too much emotion, too much accusation. I wasn't ready for this, not now. I need to breathe. I got up from the table. You can't just leave in the middle of a conversation. Margot was indignant. I can. I was surprised at the firmness in my voice. And I'm leaving. Thanks for dinner. I grabbed my bag and my phone, which Margot had finally put on the table, and headed for the door. There were exclamations of outrage behind me, but I ignored them. It was cold outside, the sharp November wind immediately penetrating my light coat. I got in my car, started the engine, and just sat there, trying to calm my breathing. 6 years. 6 years I kept my secret. It all started back in high school, when I accidentally bought an old brooch at a sale for $10 and sold it to a collector for $500. It was then that I realized that I had a flair for valuable things. I could tell a real antique from a fake, could identify the era by the smallest details. When I decided not to go to college and instead open a small antique store in Elko, my family was horrified. At first, the store really could barely stay afloat. But I started developing an online business in parallel, looking for rare items at garage sales, auctions, and thrift stores. I bought cheap, sold expensive, gradually found rich clients, collectors, ready to pay huge sums of money for real treasures. Some deals brought hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions. And my family kept thinking I was barely making ends meet, selling old lamps and dressers in a dusty little store in downtown Elko. Every family gathering turned into a parade of Margot's accomplishments and a condescending pat on my shoulder. Don't worry, honey, you'll find your way. And now they knew. Everything I'd been so afraid of had happened. I always knew they would react this way, with resentment that I hadn't told them, with a claim on my money. That's why I kept quiet. There was a knock on the window. I flinched and turned around. My father was standing by the car, slouching from the cold. I rolled down the window. "Don't leave like that," he said quietly. "Come back to the house. Let's talk calmly." "It's impossible to talk calmly there, Dad." I shook my head. "You saw their reaction. They're just in shock." He tried to smile. "We're all shocked, honestly. 15 million is—" "I know," I sighed. "But I'm not ready to have this conversation right now. I need some time." "I understand." He nodded. "But don't disappear, okay? You're still our daughter. We love you." I looked at him and saw the genuine concern in his eyes. Maybe he really did love me. He just never realized it. Like all of them. "I'll call you tomorrow," I promised. "Right now, I really need to be alone." He nodded and backed away from the car. I put it in gear and pulled onto the road. In the rearview mirror, I could see him standing in the driveway, staring after me. A small figure, growing smaller as I moved away from the house I'd grown up in, from the family that had never really known me. The drive to Elko took just under an hour, but it felt like an eternity. The radio was silent. I couldn't even stand the music. The astonished and then greedy faces of my family played over and over in my head. 15 million! 15 million! Those words, spoken in Margot's voice, rang in my ears like a haunting melody. When I finally parked in front of my store, past and present, it was almost 10 o'clock in the evening. The dark storefront with its softly lit antique clock and Victorian silver service looked peaceful. This was my world. Cozy, understandable, safe. At least until today. I opened the side door, leading straight up the stairs to my apartment. I climbed up to the second floor habitually, trying not to squeak the steps, even though there was no one around. The old, early 20th century mansion I'd bought 5 years ago seemed to have absorbed my tendency to be secretive. Opening the apartment door, I froze on the threshold. The contrast between what everyone else saw and what I let only myself see always amazed me. My apartment was nothing like the humble store downstairs. A spacious living room with panoramic windows, now covered by heavy curtains of natural silk. Parquet. Furniture specially imported from Italy. Paintings that cost more than my parents' entire house. I changed into a silk house suit, poured myself a glass of collectible red wine, and sank onto the couch. The phone, which I had turned off as soon as I left my parents' house, was burning my pocket. I knew there was a barrage of messages waiting for me there, but I wasn't ready to deal with them. Not right now. Instead, I glanced at my watch and decided to call Becca. She always stayed up late, and tonight I desperately needed a friend. "Back already?" she asked instead of greeting, answering after the second ring. "I thought you were spending the night at your parents' house." "Change of plans." I took a sip of wine. "You won't believe what happened." "Let me guess." I could hear the smile in her voice. "Was your perfect sister bragging about the new car again? Or was Mom trying to match you up with her friend's son again?" "Worse." I took a deep breath. "They found out." A second pause, then a muffled exclamation. "Damn it! How?" Notification of the deal came during dinner. Margot saw it. "Damn it!" Becca reprimanded. "What's the deal now?" "I don't know." I leaned back on the couch. "I ran away as fast as I could." "Wait, I'll be there. I'll be at your place in 15 minutes. She passed out before I could object. I was grateful, though. Becca Holloway was the only person in Elko who knew the truth about me. The owner of the little cafe across the street from my store. She'd become my friend almost by accident. One day, 3 years ago, she caught me talking to a Japanese collector on the phone about an Edo-era ring. I talked about sums with 6 zeros so casually that she couldn't help but be interested. From then on, Becca kept my secret and was the only person I could be myself with. In anticipation of her arrival, I finally turned on my phone. Immediately, notifications poured in, 15 missed calls, 32 messages. I started going through them, crinkling my nose at each new one. From Margot. We need to talk. Immediately. From Mom. Briar, honey, please come back. We're just in shock. From Margot again. You can't just leave. It's selfish. From Trevor, which was especially unexpected. Hey, Briar, listen. I know we've never really hung out much, but I was wondering if you might be interested in investing in a business. I have a great opportunity. I slammed my phone down before I finished reading. I felt nauseous. Not even 2 hours later, and they were already deciding how to spend my money. The ringing of the doorbell interrupted my unhappy thoughts. Becca stood on the doorstep with a bottle of tequila and a bag from the supermarket. I brought an emergency kit, she announced as she walked inside. Tequila, ice cream, and nachos. I see you've already started, though. She nodded at my glass. It's been a rough night? I smiled weakly. Tell me about it. Becca plopped down on the couch and began unpacking her offerings. I told her everything, the unfortunate notice, the shock on my family's faces, Margot's demands, and my escape. I always knew your sister was a greedy bitch, Becca snorted. It's not just Margot, I shook my head. They're all… You should have seen their eyes when they found out about the money. It was like total strangers were looking at me. Money always changes people, Becca said philosophically. Or rather, it shows their true colors. I sighed, twirling my glass in my hands. You know what the most frustrating thing is? All these years, they've thought I was a loser. They laughed at my passion for antiques. And now that I've made millions from it, they suddenly think they're entitled to it. My real business has long outgrown the confines of a small store. I worked with collectors all over the world, traveled to private auctions where items went for millions, consulted with museums and private collections. I had a flair. I could see value where others saw only junk. And that flair made me rich. My phone vibrated again. A message from my mom. Briar, we're very worried. Please call when you can. They won't stop. I showed the phone to Becca. Of course not, she shrugged. They smelled money, like sharks smell blood. They're my family, I reminded her. Not some predators. Are you sure? Becca raised an eyebrow. After the way they reacted? I didn't answer. I didn't know how I felt. Anger, disappointment, resentment, all of it. Come on, Becca said suddenly, standing up. I want to show you something. What? I looked at her in surprise. Get dressed. In that masquerade rag of yours? Perplexed, I changed into one of my public clothes, a simple blouse and mass-market pants. Becca, meanwhile, rummaged through my secret closet. Here, she pulled out an elegant black dress from a famous designer that I'd bought in Paris last year. Wear this. Why? I still didn't understand what she was getting at. Just put it on, she insisted. Shrugging, I took off my blouse and pants and pulled the dress on. It fit perfectly, accentuating a figure no one suspected under my baggy casual clothes. Now look at you. Becca led me over to the large mirror in the bedroom. I looked at my reflection and saw a different woman. Not the shy, apologetic Briar everyone in Elko knew, but a confident, elegant, successful businesswoman. That's who you really are, Becca said quietly. Not the girl your family thinks you are. Not the humble owner of a small store. You are this. She circled my reflection with her hand. And it was time to show them all that. I looked at myself and felt something change inside. For years, I'd hidden not only my success, but the real me. Out of fear, out of eagerness to please, out of habit, the phone vibrated again. This time, it was a message from Margot. We need money for a down payment on a house. 50,000. That's nothing to you. Think of your nephews. I showed the message to Becca. She rolled her eyes. It wasn't even a day later. They figured out how much they could get out of you fast. 50,000, I shook my head. That's a start. Exactly, Becca nodded. That's a start. There's more where that came from. She was right. I knew my sister. She never stopped. 50,000 today, 100,000 tomorrow, then a new car, then college tuition for the kids. The list would be endless. What am I gonna do? I asked again, feeling lost despite my financial independence. For starters, Becca put her hands on my shoulders. Stop being the Briar you've been pretending to be all these years. The one who's afraid of conflict, who puts the comfort of others before her own, who apologizes for her success. I stared at my reflection, the woman in the designer dress who made 15 million with her mind, labor, and talent, who had created an international business from nothing, who deserved respect, not condescending smiles. You're right, I finally nodded. No more hiding. That's my girl, Becca smiled. Now let's finish this tequila and come up with a plan to put your family in their place. We walked back to the living room, where my phone kept vibrating with new messages. I mustered up the willpower and started going through them. From my dad was the shortest. We're sorry. It made me think for a moment. Dad had always been the quietest member of the family, always going along with Mom and Margot. But perhaps he was the one who understood me best. Still not well enough, though. You know what? I put the phone away. I'm not going to answer it today. Let them wait. That's right, Becca said. Let them cook in their own juices. Meanwhile, you can decide what to do next. I nodded, feeling strangely relieved by the decision. For the first time in years, I wasn't going to conform to my family's expectations. For the first time, I was going to do what I thought was right for me. The next morning, I opened the store as usual, at 9 o'clock. All night I had insomnia, thoughts of my family, and money running around in my head, keeping me awake. In the morning, I decided that the best way to distract myself was to work. My quiet harbor among antique things, which, unlike people, did not change their attitude to me, having learned about my condition. The first 2 hours in the store passed quietly. A couple of tourists came in, browsed through old books, but didn't buy anything. An elderly lady bought a porcelain statue for $70. An ordinary day in a small antique store in Elcoat, least it seemed so from the outside. Meanwhile, I was corresponding with a client from Japan about a collection of antique nitsuke I was appraising for him. The little carved figures were worth a fortune, and I knew a collector in Europe who was willing to pay 3 times more than their current owner could imagine. My commission from such a transaction would be about $300,000. An ordinary day of Briar Mercer that no one knew about. Shortly before noon, the bell above the door chimed, and I looked up from my laptop. Standing on the doorstep was Margot, in an elegant beige suit, perfectly styled, and with a facial expression I knew well. It was her, "I've come to make up, but I actually have a plan" face. "Hi, sis," she smiled, looking around the store like she was seeing it for the first time. And I could see why. Now she wasn't looking at it as a shabby junk shop, but as the facade of a multi-million-dollar business. "Margot," I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "I didn't expect to see you here." "I took the day off." She waved her hand nonchalantly. "I thought we needed to talk. You haven't been answering calls or texts." "I needed time," I replied, closing my laptop. "Last night's dinner was complicated." "Yeah, we all got a little overexcited." Margot stepped closer, looking at the display case of silver jewelry. "You know, I've never understood how you can tell a real antique from a fake. To me, it's all just old stuff." I could barely contain a chuckle. For 6 years, she'd called my work rummaging through junk, and now she was suddenly interested. "It comes with experience," I replied dryly. Margot gave up trying to make small talk and got to the point. "Look, about last night. We're sorry, okay? We were just shocked. It's not every day you find out your sister is a secret millionaire." "I understand," I nodded, watching her closely. Margot never apologized for nothing. There was always a reason. "Mom is very worried," she continued. "You know how she is. She thinks you've taken offense at us. Didn't she?" I raised an eyebrow. Margot sighed and sank into the antique chair by the counter. I mentally cringed. That chair was 18th century, made of rare mahogany. It was worth more than her car. "Look, Bree," she rarely used that childish nickname, except when she wanted to beg for something. I realize we may have underestimated your work, but we've always loved you. It was a strange way of expressing that love. I couldn't help myself. Okay, I deserve it. She held up her hands conciliatorily. But let's start with a clean slate, okay? Now that we know about your success, we can really support you. I remained silent, waiting for her to get to the real purpose of her visit. Margot was never good at beating around the bush for long. But also, I wanted to talk to you. Like sister to sister, actually, Bree. She lowered her voice, leaning toward me. Trevor and I are going through a very rough patch right now. And here it is. I mentally prepared myself for a flood of complaints and innuendo. What's wrong? I asked in a steady voice. Trevor, he's in trouble. She fidgeted with the strap of her expensive watch. He owed the bookies. A lot. I wasn't surprised. Trevor always liked to bet. On horse races, baseball, anything. But it was usually small amounts. How much? I asked bluntly. 120,000. Margot said it almost in a whisper, like she was afraid someone would hear. I whistled. It was an impressive sum, even for me. And then there's the mortgage, Margot continued. We're 3 payments behind. The bank is threatening to take the house if we don't pay it off within a month. Why didn't you say anything before? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Pride, I guess, she shrugged. I didn't want you to know we were in trouble, especially Mom. You know how proud she is of me, a successful daughter with a prestigious job. I could barely keep from making a sarcastic comment. Yes, Mom had always held Margot up as an example, her career, her marriage, her house in the suburbs. And now it turns out that this whole facade of prosperity is coming apart at the seams. What are you going to do? I asked, even though I already knew where this conversation was going. We were thinking. Margot hesitated, searching for words. Maybe you could help? Temporarily, of course. We'd get it back. In time. Here it is. A sister-to-sister conversation. Margot, I began cautiously, I'm not sure this is a good idea. Why not? She looked genuinely surprised. It's a drop in the bucket for you. 15 million, Briar. You won't even notice the money. It's not the amount. I shook my head. It's the principle. What principle? Suddenly, Margot began to lose patience, and her voice got higher. We're a family. Mom always said that a family should support each other in times of need. It's interesting that you only remembered that now, I said. Not when I was opening the store and none of you wanted to help me. That's not fair, she frowned. The situation was different then. How? I crossed my arms over my chest. Because you thought I didn't have any money then. No, of course not. Margot blushed. It's just that you've always been so independent. We thought you were managing. And I was, I nodded. Without your help, without your support, without your faith in me. You're angry, Margot said. That's understandable. But don't let resentment come between you and your family. Think of my children, your nephews. If we lose the house. I felt a wave of anger and resentment rising inside. Margot was trying to push pity, to use the children as leverage. It was low, even for her. Margot, I tried to speak calmly. I didn't say I wouldn't help, but I need time to think about it. And maybe some conditions. Conditions? She looked offended. We're not asking for alms, Briar. No, you're asking for over $100,000, I countered. And I have a right to know what that money will be used for and how you plan to deal with Trevor's gambling problem. Margot looked like I'd slapped her. I didn't think you'd be bargaining. It's not bargaining, I shook my head. It's common sense. If Trevor doesn't fix his gambling problem, you'll be back in debt in 6 months. And then what? Margot was about to answer, but at that moment, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was Mr. Yamamoto, the Japanese client with whom I was negotiating the netski. I'm sorry, I have to take this, I said to Margot. This is an important client. She nodded, clearly unhappy with the interruption. I went to the window and answered the call in Japanese. Mr. Yamamoto wanted to change some of the terms of the deal. and I instantly switched into tough negotiator mode. Mr. Yamamoto, I said in flawless Japanese, we have already agreed on a price. A 15% increase is unacceptable at this stage. He began to explain that another appraiser had offered him more favorable terms, but I knew it was a bluff. I assure you, my voice was icy, no one else can guarantee that price for your collection. If you prefer to work with someone else, that's your right, but I won't change the terms we've already agreed upon. A pause. I could almost see him considering my words. All right, he said at last. We'll continue on the same terms, but I expect impeccable service. As always, I replied, allowing myself a slight smile. The documents will be ready by tomorrow morning. I ended the conversation and turned around. Margot was looking at me with undisguised surprise. Do you speak Japanese? She asked. And French and Italian? I nodded. In my business, it's necessary. You sounded different, she frowned. Tougher. It's business, I shrugged. You can't be soft here. Margot kept looking at me as if she were seeing me for the first time. Maybe she was. Maybe she was seeing the real Briar for the first time, not the quiet little sister she used to think of as a loser. So what about the money? She asked, returning to the interrupted conversation. I sighed. Part of me wanted to just write the check and get rid of this conversation, but the other part, the part that had just stood firm in my conversation with Mr. Yamamoto, knew that would be a mistake. I'll think about it, I said firmly, and I'll let you know in a couple days. Briar, we don't have a couple days. There was a note of desperation in Margot's voice. These people, they're not the kind of people who wait long. They could, hurt Trevor. Then Trevor should have thought of that before borrowing such sums. Oh, Margot straightened up. So you don't care what happens to your sister's family? Of course I care, I sighed. But I don't want to just throw money at the problem without addressing the root of it. What root? She almost shouted. We're drowning, Briar, and you're standing on the shore lecturing about swimming. At that moment, the bell above the door jingled again, and we both turned around. There stood Father, in his shabby leather jacket, with an unusually serious expression on his face. Dad? Margot and I said it at the same time. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said, shuffling awkwardly from foot to foot. I just wanted to stop by and see you, Briar. Make sure you're all right after last night. I was just leaving, Margot said sharply, grabbing her bag. Walking past me, she added quietly, Think about what I said. Please. She walked out without even saying goodbye to her father. We were left alone in the silence of the store, broken only by the ticking of the antique clock. Did you two have a fight? Dad asked, coming closer. Not exactly, I shrugged. More like dotting the I's and crossing the T's. He nodded, looking around. Dad rarely came into my store, maybe twice in 6 years. Now he was looking at the display cases, the shelves, the antique furniture with new interest. So all this junk is really worth something? He asked with a slight smile. It's not junk, Dad. I couldn't hold back a smile. It's a story, and it's worth money. 15 million, he whistled softly. Who'd have thought it? Certainly not you, I said without rancor. Yes, he rubbed his neck in embarrassment. We were wrong, Briar. I was wrong. That admission surprised me more than I'd expected. My father had never been a man of many words, and he certainly wasn't one to admit his mistakes easily. Thank you. I didn't know what else to say. Did Margot ask you for money? He asked bluntly. I nodded. She and Trevor were in trouble. He owed the bookies and they could lose the house. That's what I thought, Dad sighed. Trevor has always been irresponsible, and Margot was too proud to admit the problem until it was too late. I was surprised at his insight. Dad usually seemed aloof from family matters, always in the background, in the shadow of Mom and Margot. You don't have to help them, you know, he said, looking me straight in the eye. That money is yours. You earned it. I know, I nodded. But they're family, and I don't want anything bad to happen to them. I understand. He looked around again. You know, I've always been secretly proud of you. You have? I couldn't hide my surprise. Yes. He nodded. You went your own way, despite the pressure. That takes courage. I've never had that kind of courage. That confession touched me to the core. All my life, I thought my father thought I was a failure like everyone else, but it turns out he was secretly proud of me. Why didn't you ever say that? I asked. Probably because I was a coward myself, he shrugged. Always going with the flow, letting your mom and Margot make the decisions. Going against them was scary. I went over and hugged him. For the first time in years, I felt a real connection with my father, not just as a family member, but as someone who probably understood me better than I thought. What are you going to do about Margot? He asked as we pulled away from each other. I don't know, I answered honestly. Part of me wants to help. The other part is afraid this will be the beginning of endless requests and demands. You can always put conditions on it, Dad said, like that Trevor should seek help with his addiction. I looked at him in surprise. I'd said that almost verbatim to Margot. So you're smarter than I thought, he smiled weakly. And I always thought you were smart. Thanks, Dad. I felt a lump come up in my throat. We stood in the silence of the store, among the things that had survived dozens of generations of families, with all their dramas, conflicts, loves, and disappointments. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, what decision I would make about Margot's request. But for the first time in a long time, I felt that I wasn't alone. That at least one person in my family saw the real me, not money, not success, just Briar. Would you like me to show you the store? I asked my father. For real? He nodded, and in his eyes, I saw genuine interest. It was the first time someone in my family wanted to learn about my world, not because of the money he brought, but simply because it was a part of me. The message from my mom came Wednesday night as I was finishing negotiations with a collector from France. Briar, dear, your father and I would like to invite you to dinner this Friday. It's very important that you come. It's a family matter. I knew what a family matter was in my mother's mind. A council where everyone has a say, but somehow the decision is always made in favor of Mom or Margot. I used to just take it for granted. But now, after talking to my father, after Margot's visit, I saw things differently. Still, I replied, okay, I will. As I drove up to my parents' house, I noticed Margot's car and a new SUV that must have belonged to Trevor. So the family council was in full force. I took a deep breath and got out of the car. My mom opened the door before I could call out, obviously looking out the window at me. Briar! She hugged me with exaggerated tenderness. How good of you to come! In the living room, at the large dining room table, Father, Margot, and Trevor were already seated. Father nodded at me with a slight, reassuring smile. Margot looked tense. Trevor seemed frankly uncomfortable. Now that everyone's here, Mom began, taking her usual place at the head of the table. I think we should discuss the situation. What situation, Mom? I asked, even though I knew the answer. Our family's financial situation, of course. She folded her hands in front of her. In light of, recent discoveries. You mean the fact that I made money? I tried to speak calmly. Exactly, Mom nodded. Briar, darling, no one is disputing your right to that money. You earned it, and we all… She looked around the table. Proud of you. Margot wrinkled her nose a little, but didn't say anything. But, as you know, Margot's family is going through a difficult time. Her mother looked at her eldest daughter sympathetically. And I thought we could all work together to find a solution. I've already talked to Briar, Margot interjected. I explained the situation. Yes, I nodded. Margot told me about Trevor's debts and the problems with the mortgage. Trevor stared at the table, clearly embarrassed. I wondered if it had been his idea to ask me for money, or if Margot had acted on her own. Trevor was in a difficult situation, Mom said, as if justifying him. It happens to all kinds of people. It happens to gamblers all the time, I said, looking straight at him. Briar, Mom exclaimed. Don't start, please. Don't start what? I shrugged my shoulders. Tell the truth? Trevor lost $120,000 to the bookies. It's not a difficult situation. It's an addiction. Look, Trevor started, but I raised my hand, stopping him. No, you listen. I understand that you want my help, and maybe I'm even willing to help, but not just write a check and forget about it. Well, how then? Margot asked with a hint of irritation in her voice. With conditions, I said firmly. First, Trevor has to get treatment for his gambling addiction. I'll pay for whatever program you want, but he has to go through it. Otherwise, in 6 months, we'll be sitting at this table with the same problem again, only the amount will be bigger. That sounds reasonable, Dad said suddenly, nodding. Are you offering a deal? Margot looked offended. We're not in your antique business. No, we're in real life, I parried, where actions have consequences and problems need to be solved, not hushed up. My dears, let's not quarrel. My mother tried to diffuse the situation. Briar, the condition about Trevor's treatment seems reasonable. What do you think, Trevor? All eyes turned to him. He looked cornered. Yeah, I think it's fair, he finally said. I know I have a problem. Good, I nodded. Then that's the first condition. The second is about the mortgage. I can help with the debt, but I need to see all the paperwork and the payment plan. You don't trust us? Margot asked with resentment. I do, but I check, I replied. This is a business approach. We're not a business, we're a family, she said again, jumping up. Who's asking me for over $150,000? I reminded her calmly. That's a serious amount of money, even for me. Mom coughed, drawing attention to herself. There's something else, Briar. She fidgeted nervously with her napkin. About our house. I inwardly tensed. What else was waiting for me? What about it? It needs repairs, Mom said. The roof is leaking, the foundation is settling. My father and I have been saving money, but it's not enough. And you want me to… I left it unfinished. Help, yes, Mom nodded. This is your childhood home, after all. I'd hate to see it destroyed. I looked at my father. He shrugged his shoulders, as if to say, I had no part in it. How much do you need? I asked bluntly. The construction company estimated the work at $180,000. Mom answered quickly. But we have 30, so… $150,000. I finished for her. Plus 120 for Trevor's debts. And how much for the mortgage? 35, Margot said quietly. That makes $305,000. I leaned back in my chair. Not bad for the first round. First round? Mom interjected. What do you mean? I meant that this is just the beginning. I looked her straight in the eye. 300,000 today, something else in a month. Briar! Mom looked genuinely offended. We're not beggars. No, I agreed. You're a family who suddenly discovered that one of them was a millionaire. There was an awkward silence. Margot glared at me. Trevor was studying his hands. Dad was staring out the window with an impenetrable expression. I'm not saying no, I said finally, but I will have conditions. For the house renovation, I want to see all the estimates, be involved in choosing the company and materials. It's a lot of money, and I want to make sure it's spent wisely. But we've already chosen a company, the mom said. Morton Construction. They gave us the best price. Morton? I frowned. Wasn't that cousin Trevor's company? Margot and Mom exchanged quick glances. Yeah, Rick works there, Margot admitted grudgingly. But it's a good company. One that happens to give you a discount? I raised an eyebrow. A family discount, yes, Mom nodded. What's wrong with that? Nothing, as long as the work is quality, I shrugged. But I still want to see the estimates and get a second opinion. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Who can it be? Mom looked at her watch. We're not expecting anyone. I'll get it, Trevor volunteered, clearly glad to be able to leave the unpleasant conversation. He came back a minute later, followed by a tall man in an expensive suit with a folder in his hands. Sorry I'm late, he said, smiling at everyone at the table. The traffic was terrible. Rick! Margot came up to meet him. "We weren't expecting you so early. I wanted to bring the final calculations." He waved the folder. "Just like we agreed." "And you must be Briar?" He extended his hand to me. "Rick Morton, it's nice to finally meet you. Margot had told me so much about you." I shook his hand mechanically, trying to figure out what was going on. Why had Trevor's cousin come with some kind of calculation now? "Rick, maybe not now," Margot said nervously. "We were just discussing—" "Oh, I'm sorry," he said embarrassed. "I thought you'd already decided." Margot said that her sister had agreed to finance the project and the remodeling of your house. There was dead silence in the room. I slowly turned to Margot, who had gone pale. "Really?" My voice sounded too calm. "Had I agreed to it?" "I just assumed," Margot began. "That I'd say yes," I finished for her. "So much so that you've already promised my money." "Briar, honey," Mom interjected. "Margot was just being optimistic. We all believed you'd help." "So much so that you've already planned how you're going to spend my money." I looked at Rick. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morton, but I'm afraid you've been misled. I didn't agree to any funding." Rick looked confused, shifting his gaze from me to Margot. "But, the contract had already been drawn up. Margot made an advance payment on your behalf." "What?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Only 5,000, Margot said quickly. "I borrowed it from my savings. I thought you'd pay me back." I felt a wave of anger rising inside me. All this time they hadn't just asked for it. They were already handling my money as if it were their own. "Mr. Morton," I tried to speak calmly, "I'm afraid you're going to have to return the deposit to my sister. There will be no contract, at least not now, and not on the terms you've agreed to." "Briar!" Mom exclaimed. "How can you do this? We've already organized everything." "Exactly." I got up from the table. "You organized everything, without me, using my money." "We thought you'd be happy to help the family," Margot said with accusation in her voice. "To help, yes. Being used as an ATM machine, no." I shook my head. "I was really going to help. With everything. With Trevor's debts, with the mortgage, with the house repairs. But on my terms, with my involvement." Rick awkwardly said goodbye and left, and we were left in a heavy silence. "What now?" Dad finally asked, turning to me. "Are you refusing to help?" "No," I shook my head. "I refuse to be used. There's a difference." "We're not using you!" Margot exclaimed. "We're your family." "A family that has already spent my money without my knowledge," I reminded her. "It's not fair," Mom said with tears in her voice. "We've always loved you." Margot jumped up from the table. "Fine, don't help. Let Trevor get beaten up by debt collectors. Let us lose our house. Let the roof fall on our parents' heads. You don't care, do you?" "No, I don't." I stayed calm. "And you know it. I told you my terms, and I'll say it again. First of all, Trevor goes to treatment. That's non-negotiable." Trevor nodded, still looking at the table. "Second, I'll pay your mortgage arrears, but I want to see all the paperwork and a plan for how you're going to cope from here on out." "Agreed," Margot said quietly, calming down a little. "Third, about my parents' house. I'm willing to pay for the repairs, but I want a second opinion, an independent appraisal from a company of my choice." "But Rick gave us such a good price," Mom started. "Which might not be so good when the work starts, and there are unforeseen expenses." I made air quotes. "I know how it works, Mom, and I want to make sure the money is spent wisely." Mom wanted to object, but Dad put his hand on her shoulder, stopping her. "Briar's right," he said calmly. "It's her money, and she has a right to know how it will be spent. Her terms are reasonable." I looked at my father gratefully. For the first time in my life, he was openly taking my side against Mom and Margot. "All right," Mom finally said. "Let's have it your way. But I still think you're overcomplicating things." "Not complicating, but asking for respect," I corrected. "And honesty. No more decisions behind my back. No more promises on my behalf. Do we have a deal?" Margot nodded reluctantly. Mom did too. Trevor seemed relieved. Perhaps the prospect of treatment was less frightening to him than the bookmaker's debts. Then it's settled. I walked back to the table and sat down. And I expect the same respect you show each other. My father came over to me and said quietly, I'm proud of you, not just of the money, but of the way you've acted now. Thank you, Dad, I smiled weakly. It means a lot to me. I looked at my family, so familiar and yet so foreign. Something had changed today, and I knew there was no turning back. I was no longer the quiet, comfortable Briar who always gives in. I was finally starting to assert myself, my boundaries, my right to be respected. The week after the family council wasn't easy. The phone was ringing off the hook with calls and messages. My family reacted differently to my sudden firmness. Margot barely spoke to me, answering one-word answers when I asked about paperwork for the bank or treatment programs for Trevor. I'm working on it. I'll send it over soon. We'll talk later. That was our entire dialogue. Her resentment was almost palpable, even through the phone screen. Mom, on the other hand, called several times a day. At first, she tried to sympathize with me. We just wanted what was best for you, honey. Margot is so worried. She's up nights because of the debt. When that didn't work, she moved on to accusations. You're too hard on us, Briar. You never used to be like this before. On the third day, I couldn't take it anymore. Mom, I said firmly, if you're only calling to try to make me feel guilty, it's not working. I'm helping you on my terms. They're fair and reasonable, and I'm not going to change them. Only my father seemed to truly understand and support me. He sent a short message. They'll get used to it. Stay the course. Proud of you. Those simple words meant more to me than he could have ever imagined. To my surprise, Trevor turned out to be the most constructive of all. He called me himself 2 days after we met and told me that he had found a 6-week rehab program. I was touched by his sincerity and initiative. Along with my family dramas, I began to think seriously about my business. Now that my secret was out, there was no point in continuing to play the role of a humble owner of a small antique store. For the first time in years, I felt free to be myself, not just at home, but in public. I met Becca at her cafe, dressed in one of my real outfits, an elegant suit and shoes that cost more than my entire public closet. Wow, Becca whistled. You look amazing and different. I feel different too, I admitted, like I could finally breathe. And how did the locals react? She nodded toward the other visitors. I don't know yet, I shrugged. But I don't care anymore. I have an idea, Becca, a big idea. Tell me. I want to open a real gallery, I said, feeling excited. Not just an antique store, but a real showroom, with rare art, with auctions, with educational programs. Here in Elko. Elko? Becca looked surprised. Not Vegas or Reno? Right here, I nodded. This is my home, and there's potential here. Do you know how many tourists pass through town every year? Thousands. And they have nothing to offer but casinos and eateries. Imagine a real gallery with a world-class collection. Sounds ambitious. Becca smiled. I like it. Where do you plan to put it? I've got my eye on the old library building, I said. It's been on the market for a year. Victorian, high ceilings, great lighting, perfect for a gallery. The next weeks flew by in a whirlwind of activity. I bought the old library building and immediately began renovations. I hired designers, builders, lighting specialists, the best I could find. At the same time, I selected exhibits for the first exhibition, negotiated with collectors, and arranged insurance for millions of dollars. I fulfilled my promises, paid for Trevor's treatment, paid off Margot's mortgage, hired a construction company to renovate my parents' house. I did all this calmly, without unnecessary emotion, like a normal business transaction. Margot gradually thawed, especially after Trevor started treatment. One day, she even called to thank me, not for the money, but for insisting on rehab. He sounds different, she said, almost surprised. More aware, talking openly about his addiction, acknowledging the problem. I've never seen him like that. I'm glad, I replied sincerely. I hope this helps. You were right. Margot seemed to struggle with those words. About the terms. If you'd just given us the money, nothing would have changed. Mom held a grudge longer, but gradually, she too began to adjust to the new reality, especially after the renovation of their house started, and she saw how professional the company I'd chosen was. They are so neat, she said with surprise when I stopped by to check on the progress. And they are doing everything exactly as promised. That's why I insisted on choosing them, I said. Mom looked at me with an unusual thoughtfulness. You know, Briar, she said after a pause, we've really underestimated you all these years. I'm sorry, that admission caught me off guard. Mom never admitted her mistakes easily. Gallery opening day was approaching, and I was getting more and more nervous. It's one thing to run a business in secret, via the internet and phone, and quite another to openly present yourself to the world as an expert and successful entrepreneur. I ordered invitations for all the important people in town, for the press, for potential clients, and of course, for my family. The gallery looked amazing. High ceilings, perfect lighting, sophisticated minimalist design that emphasized the beauty of the items on display. For the first exhibit, I chose the theme Times and Ages, a collection of rare artifacts from antiquity to the early 20th century, each with its own unique story. Guests began arriving at 7 sharp. The mayor of the city, local business owners, journalists from regional publications. They all looked at me with surprise. Those who knew me before couldn't believe such a transformation. My family arrived when the evening was in full swing. My father looked unaccustomedly elegant in his new suit. Mom was smiling nervously, clearly feeling out of place among the bohemian crowd. Margot, to my surprise, came alone, without Trevor, who was still in treatment. Briar, this is impressive, Mom said, looking around. I couldn't have imagined. Exactly, I smiled softly. You never could have imagined what I was capable of. Now we do, my father squeezed my hand. And it's amazing. In the center of the gallery, I set up my main exhibit, a rare Chinese vase from the Ming Dynasty that I'd bought at an auction in Hong Kong. I noticed Margot standing next to it for a long time, studying every detail. Do you like it? I asked as I approached her. It's beautiful, Margot replied quietly. How old is she? About 600, I said. It was made for the imperial court. And how much is it worth? Margot asked, and I noticed that there was none of the usual envy in her voice, only genuine interest. More than you can imagine, I smiled. But it's not about the price. It's about history, about craftsmanship, about cultural value. Margot nodded, continuing to look at the vase. You know, she said finally, I never understood your fascination with antiques. I thought it was just an odd hobby. But now, looking at all this stuff, she circled the gallery, I'm beginning to understand. It's a whole world, isn't it? Yes. I was touched by her words. Every object is a story, the lives of the people who created it, owned it, loved it. You've always seen it. Margot turned to me. We haven't. At that moment, a tall, gray-haired man in an impeccable suit approached us. Mr. Levin, one of my most important clients, a world-renowned collector. Briar, darling. He kissed my hand. The gallery is magnificent. I always knew you were capable of more than phone consultations. Thank you, Alan, I smiled. Allow me to introduce my sister, Margot. Your sister is a real genius at what she does, Mr. Levin told her. Thanks to her, my collection has doubled in value in the last 3 years. Yeah, beginning to realize that, Margot replied, giving me a look of respect. After the formal part, I walked among the guests, answering questions and accepting congratulations. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Margot talking to Mr. Levin, clearly fascinated by his stories about collecting. Mom was proudly explaining to someone that my daughter has always been special. Dad just stood back, watching me with quiet pride. Later, when most of the guests had dispersed, My family came up to say goodbye. It was an amazing night, sweetheart, Mom said as she hugged me. We are so proud of you. Thank you, Mom, I smiled. It means a lot to me. Margot came up last. Amazing gallery, she said sincerely. And you're different, in a good way. I'm the same, I shook my head. I just don't hide anymore. I like this version of you, she smiled slightly. Confident, strong. After they left, I was alone in the gallery. I walked between the display cases, admiring the play of light on antique silver, on porcelain, on carved wood. All my life I had found beauty in old things, seen in them a history and value that others had overlooked. Now I finally found beauty and value in myself, not in money, not in success, but in my authenticity. I didn't know what the future would bring, how my relationship with my family would play out, how the city would react to my new gallery, how my life would change now that I was no longer in hiding. But I knew one thing: there was no turning back. And that was beautiful.